Okay, so we've been looking at separating substances out. This one here that I've got set up is a little bit more complex. It's really going to challenge the pupils this time, how to separate out mixtures. Now, in the previous examples, most of them have been solid examples. How do you separate peas from something like sand? So two solids. This one is actually going to be two liquids. So how to separate out two liquids. Now that's a little bit more tricky than very often separating out two solids. So what we're going to try and do in this experiment is to separate out water, and we're going to mix some food colouring in to try and separate the two. So we've got some water in this jug here and this cup, and I'm just going to pour in some water into the cup like so. Okay, so maybe a little bit more. And then to the water, we're going to add a food colouring. Now again, these can come from any supermarket, but you might have some of these lying around the school that you could use. I've got different colours here, red, yellow and blue. They obviously come in lots of different colours, and you could try different colours for this experiment. Or you could even mix the colours in with the water to get some different colours before you start to try and separate them. So I'm just going to pick on red here to use for this experiment. So we're just going to add a little bit of food colouring goes a long way, so I don't want to add too much, but you can already see I've added a little bit, and the red food colouring is obviously a liquid. It's gone into a liquid, the water, and it's made a solution because it dissolves into it, just like salt dissolves into water. This red food colouring dissolves into water too. So once you've given it a stir or swirled it round like that, you can pose the question to the pupils, how can you separate the two? Now that's a tricky question for most adults, let alone some primary pupils to solve the puzzle to this one. It can be done, and it can be done by using charcoal. But again, I wouldn't imagine any pupils would come up with the correct answer for this one. But again, it might be worth stopping and asking them how they could go about separating them. You'll hear some different answers, I'm sure, but I would be very surprised if any, even by primary 7, could come up with the correct answer. I'm sure many of the pupils will have heard of charcoal before. If not, you can talk to them about bonfires and wood burning, and at the end of a fire the wood looks black, and it's that charcoal that's left. In this tub here we have some powdered charcoal. You might not have this lying around your primary school, but it is something you can buy off of the internet, or in its most basic form. If you have a fire, you could even take a burnt bit of wood and scrape off some of the black charcoal from it, which should hopefully do the job. So like I say, we've got the charcoal here, we've got the food colouring dissolved in the water, and all we're trying to do is separate out the liquids. We're trying to separate and get the water away from the red food colouring. Now a key tip with this experiment is don't add too much of the charcoal. A little bit goes a long way, so you don't need to add a lot of it to the solution. When you add it, okay, it doesn't dissolve into the water, so charcoal is insoluble in the water, so it'll just float around there, and to start with, it will make the water appear all murky, and it certainly doesn't look like it's helping to separate the two liquids. But if you stir it around for 30 seconds to a minute, you should find, once you've filtered it, that the water looks a lot cleaner and without the red colour, or certainly less red. Now, one thing you could try and explain to the pupils at this point, or when they're doing this, is that the charcoal acts a little bit like a sponge. So you can explain to the pupils that, when they're washing, if they use a sponge, the sponge grabs hold of the dirt and pulls the dirt away from them, and then they're clean. So the charcoal acts a little bit like that by pulling away the red, in this case, food colouring away from the water, and so you can separate the two. You can also explain to the pupils that the longer it's in there for, the more likely it is to pull away all the red colour. Just like if they wash themselves quickly, they're not going to be as clean. So I've stirred it around for approximately a minute. While they're doing that, they could set up the next step, which is to have the cup, to have the coffee filter paper again. But this time, if you just use a coffee filter, what you'll probably find if you put it through, the holes in the coffee filter are quite big, and the bits of charcoal will go through. In fact, it's maybe worth getting the pupils to experience that for themselves, and then to ask them to come up with ideas how they could solve that problem. I won't do that, but if you try this yourself, you'll find that it doesn't really make an improvement. The water at the end looks pretty much like that. So one thing you can do is, just by taking some cotton wool, you can line the coffee filter like so, and if you place this in, then it makes just another layer to filter. Like I say, the charcoal is insoluble in water, so it's not dissolved in the water. It's grabbed hold of the red dye or the red food colouring, and so when we pour it through, the water should go right through, and hopefully, fingers crossed, the water should look nice and clear and colourless. So here we go. So I'm just going to pour through. Now it's maybe not advisable to get the pupils to hold it up like this, but just to try and see if we get a good result. Just going to pour through, and I'm making sure I pour onto the cotton wool as I do. Now, it might not look completely colourless, but it's certainly less red than what it was to start with. Now, I haven't left it too long. If you leave this for maybe half an hour, or you could maybe even set up an investigation where they leave it for different lengths of time to see what effect that has on cleaning up the water or separating out the water and the charcoal. So it still does look a little bit red there. Another tip you might want to do is, rather than just put the charcoal in all the water, is to keep some back to compare it with at the end to see the difference in the colour. Has it made a difference? So they've got something to, like a control that they can compare it with at the end. So if I just take that out, like I say, it's not completely lost its colour, but given more time with the charcoal in there, you should find that it goes colourless.